Hello, I'm Grant Bachand, and welcome to Prince George Up Close, the only community talk show where we go into one-on-one extended conversations with this city's movers and shakers. Today I'm sitting down with Councillor Susan Scott. How are you doing today?
Very, very well.
So today I want to talk to you about what it's like to be on City Council. This is your first go with City Council, and how are things going in that way?
Well, steep learning curve, not an impossible one. Surrounded by an amazing team of people. My fellow councillors, especially the two other new councillors, are terrific at sharing information, and city staff have been very accommodating. When I need to ask something, I can go to the city manager and track down the information.
So there seems to be a lot of resources at your disposal there. What is one of the biggest things that has been a shock for you, or one of the things that kind of caught you off guard when you were running for election?
In running for...
Or when you got in, when you thought you were going in?
I think it's that I can't necessarily predict what people are going to become very passionate about.
Okay. So some people, you figure maybe some people were going to be more aligned with certain things and they turned out being different and everything like that. What are some of the things that you have when you were going to run for City Council, you want to bring to the city and bring that way?
Well, I feel really strongly, and have for many years, that my city is on the brink of something. And I felt I wanted to roll up my sleeves and get involved. I think that the potential for better allocation of space started to be a big thing. We are moving towards densification, particularly in our downtown. We need to have those eyes on the ground. And it would be terrific to mingle housing with business and services and create a more inviting space.
One of the things that, and when you say downtown and housing and businesses, one of the things that I've heard from many people in the community is the want for a living space in the downtown core, which meets businesses on the bottom and housing on the top. Do you think that's, I mean, there are some buildings like that in the downtown, but do you think there's any more that can be coming down the road? Or?
I think there's always room for more.
Yeah.
And we're beginning to see some innovative design and also some redesign of existing space.
Okay. Now, when I was looking you up and everything, we were talking about your election campaign. One of the things you talked about was a balanced approach. That seemed to be part of your platform as one of the slogans. Can you tell us a little bit about that philosophy? What do you mean by a balanced approach, and how have you brought that to City Council?
I think we always want more. And gosh, none of us want to pay more taxes than we do or have.
The top thing I say every day.
But services cost.
Yeah.
So we have to balance what we can accomplish against what we can afford. And I'm not a fan of incurring long-term debt for projects. And so taking the time and energy to examine things against that criteria. What do we need and what can we afford?
One of the things that you talked about during your campaign was seniors and seniors housing. What are some of the things you want to see in that area that change or adapt or grow, or what do you want to see happen?
That's a great question, because my thinking actually shifted a little bit last fall when we had Talktober.
Okay.
What I began to hear from the seniors in the various neighborhoods and areas that we visited was, we don't want to be lumped together and just put someplace. We want to stay where we've always lived.
Okay.
Where that's reasonable, that's terrific. If you've always lived in Pineview, putting you in having you move to a seniors complex somewhere else isn't necessarily the healthiest thing. So as much as possible, I'd like to see seniors stay in their own home.
Okay.
And if we can modify space to make it better space for them, all the better.
So if they're staying in their own home, but if they need services or if they need some sort of help, how do we do that in a cost-effective way, where we're still helping them get maybe access to a nurse, or if they're older and they need that sort of help, or if they're a little bit more mobile and they don't need it? How do we get those services and not draw a crazy amount of debt for it?
Well, I think that we partner with other folks, and we're seeing a center opening or starting construction behind the Gateway complex that is going to be an example of that. And it's going to have graduated care. So when people need to, they don't have a large distance to go to maybe come into Gateway, or if they need to, the hospital. There are ways to assist people.
And
this becomes really important too if you have a couple
okay.
where one person is completely independent and the other one requires a higher level of care.
One of the things that I find interesting is you have worked and you've volunteered with the military, the Rocky Mountain Rangers. And so with the military and one of the big issues of the 2000, I think it was the 15 federal election was the VA and the VA office here in Prince George. It's reopening from what I understand. How does the city help not only seniors and veterans get to access that, but also make it a focal point of the community so we don't have to worry about it closing in the future?
We have a wonderful relationship forming and growing with City Council, the provincial MLAs, the 2 MLAs, and also the 2 MPs. And we're continuing to advocate through those branches.
Okay, and so is Prince George becoming maybe a spot or a hub for the North for veterans, for where they can come to Prince George and get the services they need?
It is. It is. And I don't know if you've tried to access any federal or provincial services or phone anybody of late, but they almost always send you to their website. We were on the highway on Canada Day, and there was a deer hit on the road, and we were trying to find who do we call. And my husband we were passengers in a vehicle. He was sitting next to me trying to contact whoever he could, and he kept being told, go to our website, go to our website. And that's actually what was happening with the veterans. That's not always the best form of service.
Yeah.
If someone is not able to access a computer, or there are communities throughout our region that don't have consistent service for internet or for cell phones. Yeah.
So there's those infrastructure challenges that maybe a person can fill the void with and everything. Yes. I know that we have this new federal government, they've allocated a lot more in infrastructure and things that municipalities can really get engaged with. What is your thoughts on this new government and how it can help from a city council point of view and a perspective, and how to get municipalities to engage in that way?
I think that municipalities have to take responsibility for not only for themselves, but also communicating their needs. Letting the other levels of government, where applicable, know what is needed and what is necessary to their constituents. Municipal government has the most direct hands-on connection with the constituents. And I know that every level of government will tell you that they do. I just think that we need to be advocates in a different way. We are less concerned or less involved, I guess, with corporate Canada and more involved with the average taxpayer.
So corporate Canada, that being head offices and the CEOs and that sort of aspect.
That's certainly an element of life, and we've established some amazing connections through organizations or bodies like our Economic Development Support Committee that is standing shoulder to shoulder to ensure that information is flowing and that we are providing the best possible atmosphere in Prince George.
When you think of the future of Prince George and you think of initiatives that we're going to be undertaking, a lot of conversation on a British Columbia level has been LNG and been those sort of natural gas resources. Where do you think Prince George needs to go for the future? Or do you think is there an industry, or we need to strengthen our forestry industry, or is there something else we can try to pull in?
You just picked my number one choice. I do think that we need to remember that forestry is an amazing industry that we have always stood with.
Mm-hmm.
We are surrounded by forest, and we have amazing technology. We have people who come from all over the world to see what's happening in this area.
Mm-hmm.
And we can improve.
Mm-hmm.
And we have the personnel and the desire for it. And I think that's still going to be a major job source in our economy now and forward.
And especially with biofuels starting to spur up quite a bit. I've been hearing whisperings of biofuel centers and industries and refineries being located to Prince George. Do you think that with, and there seems to be such a big focus now on climate change, rightfully so, it being such an important issue, Canada and Prince George in particular can be a leader in that sort of avenue of creating this sort of replacement, not necessarily to petroleum, but a way for it?
Absolutely, and we can come to the point where the bioenergy aspect of every mill can begin to not only sustain itself, but maybe some of the area surrounding it.
Mm-hmm. Well, we recently saw the Civic Center. There was an announcement there where 2 more buildings were brought on to the power grid. Do you think that is there any more future plans to go down that avenue?
Absolutely there is, and our city staff is examining every day where they can make inroads to expand the district bioenergy system.
What's your thoughts on, just in general, climate change and where Prince George can do its part to lower carbon emissions and help out greenify, if I use that word, I don't know if it's a word or not, greenify.
I guess it is now.
Greenify itself, basically.
I think we all as individuals need to be more aware of what we're doing and how we're contributing to everything. I came from the Lower Mainland, and I arrived in Prince George ready. I had all my bins set up in my back hallway, and I was ready for all my recycling, and I didn't know where to take things. And now there are 2 bins sitting in my house that get picked up every 2 weeks, and that's one inroad. Another one is being conscientious about how I purchase things. And I like to give pushback to the folks that make things. I don't need all of this excess packaging. And there's ways that we as consumers can kind of lend voice to what we want to see on the shelf.
Do you think that there's a big local aspect that we need to focus now on? Like there's a localism where we need to buy from our own farmers and buy from...
Oh, I'm a big fan of buy local. Big fan.
So how do you think we can optimize our local economy in a way that is cost sustainable for the average person? Because you always hear people say, I'd love to buy from the farmer, but I don't want to pay all this extra money just so I can buy local when I have a family to feed and I'm on a budget, you know?
You have to examine your alternatives. I know that many of our local producers, be it agriculture, goods, services, look at where am I going to get the best dollar for what I produce. And some of them do choose to go direct to export. And so there has to be a balancing act in place. And I think one of the big avenues for us is the expansion of farmers markets in Prince George. That's a way for us to understand who's in our community that's producing goods and services, and how can we access them.
And there's been we were talking before that there's been a huge explosion, or not an explosion, but a growth at least.
A good growth.
A good growth of farmers markets. Do you think that farmers markets need to start looking at a way that's more, not institutional, but like of a structure that can support them as a middle person to can help them with their costs and their development and things like that?
It depends, because a little bit producer to producer, you need to know what their volume is and whether they're interested in being bigger than who they are, or whether they're just trying to get to the farmers market. If we can help them get there, maybe they can explore and expand from there. but maybe not. It depends on the individual.
So what is something, and when you think about yourself and your time on City Council, what are some of the things you would like to see when you eventually run for re-election, or if you decide you're a one-and-done person? What do you want to see after these last 4 years have been your mark?
I've spent the last year and a half involved with the Select Committee on Homelessness and Affordable Housing.
Okay.
And I know that we've made enormous inroads. I would like to know that people who need services get them, whether they're able to afford them or not. And we do have individuals who have mental health issues, and there are exciting programs happening. We have an exciting array of service providers in Prince George. And one of the things that I always go back to is Car 60. That the RCMP and Canadian Mental Health and Northern Health have come together so that they can actually assist somebody on a call and help assess, is this a criminal issue, is this a health issue, and make more respectful choices about how to deal with that person.
Do you think there's more programs like Car 60 going to come down the road that are going to to have that same model in a way with the RCMP, or maybe with even the fire department?
I really hope so. I know that innovation abounds, and we just have to pick what's best for our community. Right
now, with the Select Committee on Homelessness, what are some of the initiatives that are going and coming out of that committee, and what are some of the things that are being brought forward from it?
The big thing we're expanding right now is something called collective impact.
Okay.
Through our manager of social development, Chris Bone, we have partnered up with the Tamarack Institute, and we've been exploring how can we connect all the necessary folks in the various service industry, et cetera, that can network together to form a backbone to create better delivery of service without everybody separately reinventing the wheel. And everybody so far seems really excited to dialogue with each other and to help make that come about.
So almost like a social network for, not a social network, but a network of these social services. When one of the things
social and government, et cetera,
it all kind of goes together.
Yeah.
When I think of, and when I especially think of the conversation around homelessness and social services and things, one of the things that came out at a city council recently was the 3rd and George area, with the RCMP Superintendent Warren Brown talking a lot about that area and being a hotspot. Where do you think we can improve that area, number one? And number two, is it an improvable area? If it isn't, can't be improved, how do we deal with it?
That's something that we've started to examine. And I know that someone has suggested that we go to the British system of having cameras in our downtown. Maybe that's a way. I don't know. We're starting to pull that all apart and talk about that issue and how to best approach it.
So it could be an enforcement aspect, or it could be also a social services aspect as well, with more sort of things like that.
And also the other thing that we already mentioned, and that's people living downtown. More eyes on the ground. If we have people who are living amongst the downtown, above businesses or in buildings, et cetera, freestanding buildings, we've got more people available to monitor what's happening.
With more people living downtown, it seems like we've always talked about the rejuvenation of downtown. It's been a long time story, and I think the magic bullet has always been talked about as housing, but the housing doesn't really seem to be happening too much. Do we almost need now a private-public partnership to happen to kind of to put the spark to the flame, to the fire almost?
A little bit, and that has sort of started already with the Elizabeth Fry Society and with a couple of investors that have examined putting housing in the downtown core.
And do you think that there's an opportunity even maybe for student housing in the downtown area?
I really want it to be
Yeah,
there.
there was a recent report and a news report that I remember reading about student housing has been one of the areas where people have been saying that it's a good thing to start spurring, with CNC and UMBC needing to grow their areas, right?
And I always envisioned that there would be some sort of housing complex next to the Wood Innovation and Design Center.
Oh yes, yeah, right in the little property right there. Where do you think UMBC and the City of Prince George's relationship is going in the future? Do you think that it's obviously both of these institutions are huge institutions in our community, and they've really helped grow our community? How do you see them working in tandem in the future? Do you see there being more opportunities in the future coming up?
Absolutely, absolutely. More opportunity for economic development in partnership, more opportunity for approaching projects together. There has been the creation in the last year and a half of 2 new select committees. One is on the business side of education, and the other on the student side of education. One's chaired by Albert Kohler, and the other by Jillian Merrick. And they are connecting not just CNC and UNBC, but also the school district, et cetera, to talk about who are we and how do we help each other. And there's a desire, a clear and present desire for us to become an education destination, where people would once say, well, I want to go off to UBC. Maybe they would say, I'm going to come to UNBC. And how will the community support that? I've had many conversations with various sectors of industry in Prince George. I remember when I first came here, UNBC partnered with the city and Northern Health and a few others in their recruiting process.
Okay.
Not just for students, but also for faculty and staff.
Okay.
So maybe I need, this woman is an amazing chemistry prof. Her husband, oh, wait a minute, he needs employment maybe within the medical field.
Okay. Yeah.
So let's work together.
Okay.
Let's push both those levers together and help each other.
In a cooperative sort of way to
Absolutely.
make things work. Do you, when we think about the city and we think about where we're going, there's been a tone in this last two to 3 years since the election about pride, civic pride being such a big important thing, especially with the Canada Winter Games. How are things changing in that department for the city?
Well, we've made positive inroads in both of those, but what we're looking to now is to increase and solidify neighborhood pride.
Okay.
I live here, and this means something to me. It's not just that I live here, but I'm connected here, in whether it's heritage or Pineview or the Heart, etc. I've had people from every neighborhood of Prince George say, you don't understand what I deal with.
Yeah.
You just don't know.
Yeah.
Here I am, and I'm willing to listen.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to know if people don't tell me. So I've tried to make myself as available as possible for people to do that.
And especially with that, you have each individual neighborhood having specific problems and specific things that need, and I'm just thinking right now about the VLA more than anything else as being a very specific, and it's appeared even in this last election. And I know we keep going back to the election, even though it's been like 2 years ago. This is my current perspective here. But like even the VLA has been coming up and saying that we're a neighborhood that has specific needs and specific desires. Have you been working with them since you've been in council to try to fix things?
Very much so.
How do we improve that area? Like how do we, and not that it doesn't needs, how do we make it even better?
I think it comes in several directions. One of them, again, is enforcement. The other one is education. That empowering people to have pride within themselves as individuals, as a household, as a block, as a neighborhood. And that you're not just here as a stopping off point. Even if you are here as a stopping off point, what is your responsibility when you join my neighborhood. And in a positive way, encouraging people to talk to each other and to communicate that pride.
Okay. So I want to do a bit of a hypothetical here. I know that hypotheticals are always fun, but I'm going to give you a genie lamp.
I have to leave now.
Yeah,
Sorry.
exactly. I want to give you this hypothetical genie lamp.
Okay.
And if you could ask this genie for any one thing for the city of Prince George or this community of Prince George, what would be your wish or your desire to have for this area? And I love throwing hypotheticals at.
Wow, that's interesting. That's really interesting because for the last little while, I've said, if I could wave my magic wand, what would I do?
Yeah.
And one of them is to create a multi-purpose facility in or really closer to the VLA.
Okay.
That would be a retransformation of the Four Seasons pool.
Okay.
Plus community hall access space for various organizations.
Is that, it has a whiff almost of a performing arts center in a way?
No.
No, not like that.
That's a separate function. And I'm still on the edge on the Performing Arts Center. I know the passion of the people who've been involved. I'm not getting that passion across the city.
There's certainly a lot of people who can understand having that sort of a center,
Sure.
but not wanting to have it a tax-based sort of one that's done. So even so, you're kind of thinking like a multi-use center though, like one that can, like a pool, one that can like create a sort of
Wouldn't
a
that be cool?
community pride and everything like that. Yeah, I think that'd be pretty interesting. We have one in almost every part of the city, right?
Well, why not?
Exactly.
But somebody's going to need to win the Powerball lottery.
Yeah, no kidding, right? I guess my final question is, what's your one, I guess, what's your hope for the future? Where do you want to see Prince George go? And do you see yourself going back to council and continuing your work after these 4 years are over and everything?
People keep asking me if you're running again, and I think I just got here.
Yeah.
And I'm still working on where I am right now and being the best that I can be to all of this. And boy, I think that for me, it's continuing to listen, continuing to reflect the thoughts of people who do communicate with me and let me know what's important. That if we could listen to each other and properly reflect those needs and wants, which are not always the same, examine them and line them up as best we can. I think the continuing to be more respectful and prudent when it comes to finances. We've come a long way in the last 10 years, and I credit both the current and former councils for putting us on a better path in terms of funding our utilities and funding our things like roads and snow clearing and so on. Have we made mistakes? Sure. At the end of the day, we're still people. But the willingness to sit down, ask ourselves the hard questions, and make a better path forward is very much in our hands, and very much the goal of the council that I sit with. They are, to a person, deeply committed within this community and want to make things better. Yeah,
excellent. Well, thank you. I appreciate you coming on, Susan. It was great seeing you.
It was a pleasure to see you.
Thank you. And that's our show. A big thanks to Councillor Scott. Let us know what you thought by tweeting me at Grant Bachand. Till next time, thanks for watching.